Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. It's episode 2617 of The Tom Woods Show. And I would say, of all the appearances of David Stockman on The Tom Woods Show, this one is timed the best. Like this one, yeah. This is the very week we need to have this conversation. We're talking today about, this continuing resolution, about Thomas Massie, about Elon Musk and DOGE, and what, if anything, is going to come from any of the stuff they dug up. So David Stockman, as you surely know, was director of the Office of Management and Budget under Ronald Reagan, was a U.S. congressman, had a very successful private sector career, is now would you say the publisher of David Stockman's Contra Corner? How would we put that?
Well, actually, I'm the publisher, I'm the writer, I'm the editor, I'm the fact checker.
So whatever.
Yeah. But, by the way, Tom, I used to be the researcher, but no longer. I use Grok 3. I mean, it is really terrific in terms of just digging this stuff up. You used to search on Google or one of the others, but you had to do some work and it would take time and you'd have a lot of false starts. When you use AI now, you can really retrieve the information. You have to check it. You can ask them twice or cross-check it. But it's democratizing the availability of information so people don't have to be misled over and over and over again by the mainstream media slogans and sound bites that try to shape the dialogue, the public discussion. So that's all to the good. Most everything else is pretty bad at the moment, but that's for the good. And of course, what we're talking about here is the bad at the moment is, I can't believe it. I saw the post by, I guess, last night or this morning by President Trump attacking Tom Massie. Now, when we think about what will make America freer, more prosperous, again, there is not one member of the House or Senate, maybe Rand Paul accepted, who stands more steadfastly, more consistently, more knowledgeably, more articulately for those principles than Tom Massie. And here we have the so-called MAGA president viciously attacking him and insisting he's going to primary him again and so forth. That is so misguided. That is, you talk about a foul ball. You talk about a stray shot. This is terrible.
No, it's absolutely terrible. And he there were aspects of his instincts in this second term that were better than the ones in the first term. So there was some cautious optimism called for. Now, not on spending. But you already know my Zen view on spending. Yeah. My view on spending is no one's ever going to fix it, so I don't worry about it. Where there is no solution, there is no problem. That's just the way I'll think about other issues. Maybe foreign policy might be able to be fixed, that kind of thing. But this Thomas Massie thing, what they're trying to say is that Massie, when they're at their most charitable, is that Massie has his heart in the right place, but he has to understand that now's not the time to fight. We're going to fight next time. This
Mañana.
Yeah. But what I was saying on X is next time never comes.
Yeah. Well, that's what I posted yesterday. My heading was Mañana, Mañana, Mañana. It's always tomorrow. And we've been hearing this for decades now. And here we are. When I started in 1981 with Reagan, first thing we had to do was confront the debt ceiling, which was expiring. It was $1 trillion. By the time Trump got to the White House, it was 20 trillion. By the time he left, it was 28. It's pushing 37 today, and it's going to be 70 sometime in the early 2030s. That's how fast the debt is growing, and that is the number one issue. It has to be confronted. It has to be acknowledged, and we need realistic, sweeping actions, and now, not tomorrow, not next year, not next September. So, that's kind of the meat of the matter at the present time. Now, I've said before, because we want to be somewhat balanced here if we can, that you really should look at Donald Trump as the Forrest Gump of contemporary politics. You remember Forrest Gump said, with a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. Well, that's exactly what you have with Donald Trump. On some things, he's been really good. On War and Peace, I have to give him pretty decent marks. On standing firm on, Ukraine and getting out and telling Zelensky what has to happen, and then taking actions like cutting off the flow of weapons and intelligence, and making it very clear to everyone that the firing has to stop, the war has to stop. I think is pretty terrific. Now, on some other foreign policy issues, he may not be quite so good. But even on the other litmus test I have, Taiwan, he refuses to say that if they get themselves into war with China, we're going to step in and start World War III. So he's good on that. He was good on DEI and woke nonsense. He really laid it to them in the State of the Union. I thought that was terrific. He is, hammer and tong gone after this green energy, climate crisis hoax nonsense. That's good. He's put really good people into office. And look at what Tulsi Gabbard did just yesterday. She revoked the security clearance of all these deep state operatives who've spent the last 6 or 7 years trying to stop the democratic process in the United States. So when you get, the FBI is going to have a real airing very quickly, obviously. Bobby Kennedy at HHS. This is pretty terrific stuff. But when it comes to core fiscal and economic issues, unfortunately, Trump has had bad ideas most of his adult life, and you can't get him out of his head for some reason. So we just have to deal with them as they come along. And here we are today, and we have a big one. They should never be putting this, I call him Squeaker Johnson. He's the speaker, but he's squeaking like, he's one of the operatives for the deep state down in Washington. But this is basically validating everything the Uniparty has been doing on the spending front for the last couple of decades. I checked yesterday. The bill has about $1.62 trillion or something of a discretionary budget authority in it. And that is 47% more than Obama's last budget. Now, no one ever said in 2016 that Obama was starving the beast. He was a pretty pedigreed big spender when it comes to the facts of the budget. And here we have a Republican CR at 47% more than Obama's last budget. And we have a alleged MAGA president trying to run out of town the one guy who's raising his hand and saying, "Stop the madness." That's where we are.
My friends, we're all on the spectrum, the risk spectrum, that is. Some of us play it safe while others are ready to bet half their income on red on a Las Vegas roulette wheel. But I am willing to take some risks in exchange for being able to live on my own terms. For still others, even the prospect of not receiving a regular paycheck from an employer is too much to bear. There's no right or wrong here. It's a matter of what you're comfortable with. And that's why the franchise option can be a happy medium between the extremes. Yes, you're going out on your own, but you're not entirely on your own. With a franchise, you've got existing branding, existing products and services, and existing formulas all ready to go for you. A friend I know from the libertarian world has set up a system that you can use to narrow down all the franchise possibilities out there to one that will work best for you, given your goals and interests. He's just published a free guide to franchising that is well worth the read. Get your free copy at tomwoods.com/franchise. It's so frustrating because Massie has been so solid on so many things. He was solid on COVID. He was solid on Russiagate when a lot of Republicans ran the other way because they were too scared. They didn't want to be called names.
Yeah.
I mean, on everything, he's been solid. Like they want to put a kill switch in your car if they think you're not driving well enough. No,
he's even what I like. He's even solid on raw milk, and I have for those two issues, COVID, raw milk. As a guy who's been around life for a while, I have a fond memory. I was a kid. I grew up on the farm. I went to a one-room country school, and the first thing we did in about the third grade was go to a measles party that one of the mothers would hold in the neighborhood, so all the kids would get measles, have immunity, and then go on with life. Okay, that's what we understood about herd immunity way back then. He stood, and the other thing is we had a dairy farm, and every day we drank raw milk right out of the cow after it was cool, and we didn't keel over dead either. So. He stands for a view of the state versus the market and society and individual liberty that's fundamental to, the correct outlook on policy and politics and government and where we should go. If you had to pick anybody who I said he's almost like an icon for what needs to be done in this country. So if you had to pick anybody to attack, he should be the last one.
The last one. Okay. And yet, because Trump got it in his head, because, he studied it for 10 minutes, maybe. They got to pass the CR so he could have 4 or 5 months. Now, he doesn't need 4 or 5 more months. If they have to shut down the government, they could do it. Donald Trump is at the peak of bully pulpit time. He has a better public, posture today. The public is listening to him. And if the government shut down, he could explain like no other Republican ever has before the reason for it, which is the big spenders just won't stop adding to the national debt and burying our economy in, unsustainable borrowing. Now, that's what he could do. And he could call their number and he could say, and I wrote about it yesterday, I call it the mother of all rescissions. I want to talk about this rescission thing. But before we do that, I just need to say that Thomas Massie is the exception in the world of Trump derangement syndrome. Because you'd think the congressman who's standing up to Trump, well, then everybody would rally to him. But they draw the line somewhere, David. They're not going to rally Thomas Massie, that's for sure.
Yeah, but
they might implicitly support Trump.
Yeah, but what was really annoying about Trump's post yesterday, I guess it was on Truth Social, he compared Massie to Cheney. Okay, I mean, that is the ultimate insult. Okay, in terms of, she was a raving neocon establishment politician. Her father was, who. And to compare Tom Massie, who's a bright light of consistency and honesty and solid thinking in government, to Liz Cheney. I mean, come on.
Now, David, in this analogy, he's Liz Cheney in the analogy.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, all right, so talk about, because you had this piece the other day that you sent me that deals with how it is that the Republicans could go about, or let's say could have gone about this the right way, because the savings, the implicit savings anyway, identified by DOGE is about to be just completely funded, and we're going to pretend like we never uncovered anything. And there is a way of stopping that. By the way, I don't know why isn't Elon Musk rallying to Massie? Because Massie's the only one who actually is taking his alleged savings seriously.
Yeah, I think it's happening so fast in real time that even Elon, who's not an experienced politician, and I'm strongly for what he's doing, maybe he hasn't figured out fast enough footwork to deal with this. But what he did figure out last week, I think Thursday, as recently as Friday last week at a meeting, when Rand Paul said, we got to use the rescission authority. And this sounds very arcane, but it's sort of the heart of what's going on. All of these contracts that have been canceled by DOGE, and rightly so, all this crazy, wasteful foreign aid spending, all this stuff that was buried in the education budget, and Department of Energy and green energy and all the rest of it. None of that will actually come to the bottom line as a cash dollar of savings or a reduction in this uncontrolled growth of the public debt unless there is budget authority rescinded or canceled that has previously been appropriated. Otherwise, we get into this, and I had to deal with it. I understand it pretty well. I was back there when it happened. The 1974 Impoundment Act. At the time, the president had arguable discretionary authority not to spend money that Congress had appropriated if he had a reasonably decent reason. And the Supreme Court took the case and eventually said, well, the power of the purse is lodged by the Constitution in the Congress, and the president can't simply, on a whim, override the power of the purse delegated to the Congress. Okay. But what the Congress then did was to codify that. They said, yes, but if the president decides or concludes that spending that's been appropriated is unwise or wasteful or not needed or too much, he can send it back up to the Capitol Hill in a rescission authority that gives the Congress 45 days to approve. And if the Congress approves the rescission, it's an up or down vote, no filibusters in the Senate, no procedural hurdles. If the rescission is approved, then the spending is canceled. Now, it's a little bit of a long-winded discussion, but it's really important because unless there are rescissions, every single one of the wasteful spending items that DOGE and Elon Musk have discovered will not save a dime. They'll simply have to reallocate the budget authority to a slightly less wasteful, slightly less stupid project. And so Elon finally got that, came to an understanding about that last Thursday and wanted to go big time with rescission. So hearing that, I put together a package of $600 billion of rescissions that could be sent to the Hill within a week, that could be voted up or down by Congress as a precondition for another continuing resolution for an extension of the authority, for the rest of the fiscal year and beyond. But make it a precondition. And I showed what you could do. There is $140 billion of excess spending authority still out there slopping around the government that could be spent, that came from all the COVID relief bills, from a lot of excess appropriations for green energy and all the, wasteful stuff that Biden was doing. You could cancel all that, $140 billion. Then there is also $300 billion left that could be canceled from the $370 billion Biden IRA. If you remember that one, if everybody remembers that one, stands for Inflation Reduction Act, the biggest misnomer and, hypocritical use of the language that I've ever heard, because it was spending for just all this green energy stuff, loans and tax credits for wind and solar and, carbon capture and EV vehicles and so forth. Anyway, you could cancel all that. And then I listed, another 7% across the board rescission of what's in the continuing resolution for 2025, which would save another $100 billion. Well, without getting tied up too much in all the math, what I demonstrated in this piece yesterday, and I put it together, or a couple of days ago, I put it together pretty quickly, is you could come up with $600 billion worth of already approved spending authorities or tax credits that could be packaged, sent to the Hill, passed, and canceled as a down payment on the $2 trillion of savings that we need, and as a precondition for another continuing resolution, because they haven't passed one of the 12 appropriations bills. So that was the idea. And instead of doing that, what we end up with this morning is the MAGA president tried to run the one guy out of Congress who's actually been steadfast on the anti-spending front. It's a pretty sad day, but that's where we are.
I'm hopeful that once this particular moment passes, there's some way that the two of them, it's not that it's Massie's fault, but turn the heat on this and he step back on this particular absurdity. Hey everybody, quick word from Woods here. It's my goal to have the best supporters program out there, better than anything on Patreon or anywhere else. Support the Tom Woods Show, and not only do you get entry into my no censorship Tom Woods Show elite group, but you also get the 16-page Tom Woods elite letter mailed to your home every month. Who else is doing that? This is all new material, completely different from the emails I send, and it is red hot. My supporters also get invites to my murder mystery dinner parties that I've been holding around the country. I'll be adding more cities soon to woodsmystery.com. I hold these in penthouse suites at luxury hotels with a beautiful catered dinner. It's a ton of fun. I also invite my supporters to my annual Christmas party, and the higher up you go as a supporter, the more things you get. Some supporters even get a small gift in the mail from me every month in addition to the newsletter. So go check it out, supportinglisteners.com. You will not believe all the goodies at supportinglisteners.com, and my profound thanks to all of you. By the way, I beg your pardon, David. At the beginning, I was so eager to get into the conversation that I neglected to tell everybody that you have a new book with the provocative and bold and blunt title, How to Cut $2 Trillion. Now, you do have a subtitle.
Yeah.
If it just stood alone, that would be fine.
Yeah, the subtitle is a blueprint from Ronald Reagan's budget cutter to Musk, Ramaswamy, and the DOGE team. So, what I did was, ironically, a lot of the stuff that we took on in 1981 that got cut by a year or two by Congress and then restored over the years, I just went back to all those. I found 16 agencies that I thought you could get rid of entirely. I found another 9 that could be cut by 50%. I proposed a 34% cut in most of the rest of non-defense government. But even after you did all that, that would only provide about $400 billion a year out of the $2 trillion that you need to get the fiscal accounts reasonably back in order. So I said, that's the fact. And even if you went hammer and tong, you went wholeheartedly after the fact, you would only end up with $400 billion. And I went through everything. This included cutting the IRS by 50%. This included shutting down the education department, shutting down USAID entirely, getting rid of stupid things like the National Endowment for Democracy or the Legal Services Corporation, a whole bunch of OSHA, a whole bunch of stuff like that. Even then, you only say $400 billion, so I call that the fat. I had 2 more categories, which I call the muscle and the bone. The muscle is the national security budget. Right now, it's $1.4 trillion if you count everything, including foreign aid, security assistance, and veterans expenses, which is $350 billion a year and is kind of the deferred cost of war. I said we got to cut by $500 billion. We can do it by going to a true America First foreign policy, or what I call Fortress America defense. And then even if you cut all the fat and you cut the muscle back by 50% or $500 billion, you still are not even halfway to your goal. That's how bad the fiscal circumstance is at the moment. So I said we have to take another $1.1 trillion out of the bone, that being all the entitlements, the good, the bad, and the indifferent, from Social Security and Medicare all the way down to means test. Now, I went through the means tested entitlements just to make a couple points about this, and then maybe we could go on. We spend $1.1 trillion a year on means tested entitlements, which is a way of saying programs primarily directed at the poor. Food stamps, Medicaid, cash assistance, housing subsidies, and Head Start, and everything in between. And if you look at that, that amounts in current dollars to 185% of the poverty line per capita. In other words, it's about $26,000 per poor person in the United States. The poverty line per person is 14,000. If you go back to 1980, when we started the battle and tried to reform some of these means-tested programs, spending in 1980 in current dollars, again, same purchasing power, was about 6,000. All right. So we've gone from 6,000 per poor person in constant dollars to 26,000 per poor person in constant dollars today. Just the thing grows and grows and grows, and it can't be managed from Washington. And my argument was, let's just bundle all of that up in a what we call a block grant, no strings attached, send 75% of the money back to the states where it comes based on their contribution to federal taxes, and save the other 25%, which would be $230 billion a year, and get started on cutting the bone. Now, we would also have to means test Social Security. We would have to have sweeping changes in the reimbursement procedures for Medicare and a lot of other things. But the key point is, if you really want to close the budget gap and stop this soaring public debt, you've got to have at least $1 trillion per year of sweeping reforms in the entitlement area, means tested, and social insurance alike. So that's kind of a quick summary of what's in there. And I think, Elon Musk has started down the path, DOGE has started down the path. They really haven't gotten into the entitlements in a big way yet. They need to, but at least they're getting front and center in public attention on the fact that spending is out of control. Elon Musk every day is out there saying this debt can't continue to spiral and soar the way it is. And that's the first step. If the public is clueless about how bad this problem is, the politicians are never going to do anything about it. I think DOGE is helping. I call it like the artillery. In a military campaign, you soften up the target with the artillery, but then you have to send in the infantry to clean out, the enemy on the other side. Now, DOGE is the artillery. They're lobbing a lot of bombs on the target. It's softening up the target. But unless we can come up with a plan to have the infantry in the Republican ranks on Capitol Hill, march to the well of the House and vote for big sweeping entitlement reforms and a drastic curtailment of the warfare state, we're not going to get very far towards a solution.
At one point, you use the expression doom loop, and you say that the situation with the U.S. debt is on the verge of entering a doom loop. What does that look like?
Well, what I was talking about was the fact if the debt gets big enough, then you're very vulnerable to rising interest rates. And right now, let's just say in round terms, we're pushing $40 trillion of public debt. It'll be there. It's guaranteed to be there in a matter of a year or two. And so therefore, what that means is that every 1% rise in the interest rate is going to cost $400 billion of more interest expense spending every year. Now, we've already crossed the $1 trillion mark in interest for the first time. If you go back 8 or 9 years ago, it was only $300 billion. We're now up to $1 trillion. But if you look at these projections out even a decade or two, we could end up spending $2, $3, $4 trillion a year on interest expense alone because the principal of debt keeps climbing higher. I mentioned it's headed to $70 trillion a moment ago. And so if the debt keeps rising and then the markets finally realize the Fed can't print enough money without inflating the system into collapse to monetize all that debt, once the markets realize that, and I think even the Fed is not going to open up the printing press the way maybe some people expect, the debt has got to be financed in the bond pits, in the bond markets, and it's supply and demand. And if the government's out there borrowing 2, 3, and 4 trillion a year as interest expense rises on top of all the entitlements and all the warfare state spending, you're going to find interest rates soaring. And if interest rates soar against, let's say, 70 trillion of debt, 1.5 points of interest will add $1 trillion a year of spending. Now, the real scary thing is if you look at the long-term CBO projections, and they're based on rosy scenario. By long-term, I mean 25 years out to the middle of this century, 2050, early 2050s. If you look at those projections, they say, well, we're never going to have another recession again. There's never going to be another inflation flare-up. Interest rates are going to remain in the 2 to 3% range as far as the eye can see, out to mid-century. And with all of that, and Congress is never going to again cut any taxes or raise any spending. These are all totally implausible, rosy scenario, can happen kind of assumptions. But I'm dwelling on this because when you take all that into account, crank it into the CBO models, by the early 2050s, which is, not that far down the road, a quarter of a century, the public debt will be $150 trillion. $150 trillion. We're not going to get there. The whole system would collapse under the weight of it if we continue to stumble down the path towards that end. So that's where we're heading. We're heading towards, that's what I mean by a doom loop. It gets so bad that the whole system inherently, inexorably has to crash. And unless, and in what is happening today, they're whipping the Republicans in the Freedom Caucus and a few people that were willing to be courageous enough to stand with Tom Massie and say, we can't vote for this CR. It's the same old, same old, same old. But they're up there beating the hell out of them. They're, threatening everything and offering everything. If that's where we are with a MAGA president and a Republican majority in the House and the Senate, I mean, all three branches of government that are relevant to the fiscal governance are now in Republican control. And instead of looking at the $150 trillion monster that's not that far down the road, they're saying, give us another 5 months of the same old, and we'll come up with something. Well, I say, enough of that. Okay, enough of that. We've been doing that for decades now, ever since the 1980s, really. And this would be, so I have a hope here that a few people will stand with Tom Massie, and the Democrats aren't going to give many votes, I don't think. And this resolution will be defeated. The government will shut down, will be in a crisis, and that's exactly what we need, okay? Because they're never going to do anything unless there is a severe crisis that, compels extraordinary action.
Well, it drives me absolutely up a wall that you and I have had to record this the very morning of presumably the vote happens. That's where the timing is not good.
Yeah,
So I hate that we're by the time people hear this, we're still in this realm of ignorance, but the listener knows the genuine outcome. Well, on the Massie thing, I have great affection for him as a person. I think he's an extremely decent guy. I think most of the people, all the people who are attacking him, with the exception, I will admit, of Trump himself, have no idea what it's like to be in this position where you're completely isolated and the whole world is against you. And Massie has taken that on multiple occasions. And every normal person concedes that he was right at the time of COVID to demand that vote and say there was a problem with the spending bill. I mean, the guy keeps getting vindicated over and over. And what's interesting is that Roger Stone has been saying that we should give the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Ron Paul. But, as much as I favor that, although Dr. Paul would want to make sure that the medal was privately funded, I'll pay for the medal if that's what it takes to get it to him.
Well, I'll contribute. Okay.
Yeah, right. I mean, we'll all pitch in $5. We'll get the medal for him. But the problem with that is that we have a president who would have wanted to primary Ron Paul.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, the other thing is, here we are again. The other hinge point, the other pivot point was March 22nd, I think, 2020, when that ridiculous CARES Act came up, in which they threw sight unseen $2.2 trillion in everything, handouts for 110 million people, all the money that went to DOE and the education department and everything else. And Tom Massie said, no, we got to know what's in this. I want to vote on it. And what did Trump do? He put out a social media statement saying he should be primaried. He's a terrible guy. Well, here we are 5 years later, same damn thing. It's almost to the month. What day is it? Oh, it's the 10th. I think then the 10th of March. It was the 20th of March then, or 22nd. And they're at it again. They've learned nothing. Okay. And then the irony is, Tom, and we got to just, deal with all these facts. Trump didn't win because he was such a charismatic politician or because he did such a fantastic job last time. He did put the economy through the ringer in 2020. But he won because of the 40-year high inflation that was unleashed by the spending bills that Tom Massie opposed way back in March 2020. And then the Fed printed all the money and it flowed into the economy. And all of a sudden we had 8, 9, and 10% inflation where they thought it was 2. Now, it was that 10% inflation in goods and services on Main Street that finally hit the grocery bill, the gas bill, living expenses of mainstream America so hard that they voted to throw the rascals out, which they should have. I mean, the Democrats deserved it. And Kamala Harris was, the worst candidate since Hillary Clinton. And Trump won by default. He won by default as a result of the inflation that he created. Okay, that's where we are right now. And yet, rather than sort of say, I lucked out there, maybe we've got to have some policies that go in a different direction. He's attacking the same guy who warned about the problem the first time around the barn. And I just find that, beyond. It's beyond the pale.
You mentioned the analogy with Forrest Gump and the box of chocolates. Well,
yeah.
As we both know, with any box of chocolates, you like some of them, you don't like others.
Yeah.
Well, one particular chocolate I liked was when, out of the blue, Trump said, why don't we cut the military budget by 50% and see if Russia and China will do the same thing? There's no reason we can't do that. And I thought, that's one of the good things about speaking off the cuff and off the top of your head.
Yeah.
No Mitt Romney would ever have thought that way. And he wouldn't have permitted himself.
That's the one great saving grace of Trump. He has not been house trained.
Right.
He has not been scripted. If he hears something that sounds plausible, he runs with it. Now, half the time he's getting bad information and he's running with things that aren't plausible at all. Like starting this trade war with Canada is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. If there's any country that their economy is integrated thoroughly with ours, and now they're saying, well, it's not really a trade war with Canada, it's a drug war. Okay, well, what's coming in? Fentanyl is a bad thing, yes. But you know how many pounds of fentanyl came across the border and seized by the Border Patrol in 2023? 2 pounds, okay? And it was 43 pounds in 2024. It averages 20 pounds. This is bad stuff, I agree, but it was worth $400,000 even at the street value of $20,000 a pound for fentanyl. Now, we have $1 trillion worth of two-way trade with Canada. Our ag economy, our automotive sector, much of industrial and consumer production, it's all in good trade. We're reasonably balanced. We have a free trade agreement. There are no tariffs anyway. So of all the places in the world that you would want to start a trade war with, China, Canada is the last. And so why are we doing it? Well, because someone told him there's too much fentanyl coming across the border. Well, 2 pounds is not too much, okay? You deal with, the real problem is the war of drugs. It's not the fentanyl. That's another discussion. But the point is that I'm making is, when he hears information, he runs with it. If it's bad information, we end up in a really unfortunate spot. If it's good information, like on the 50%, I wrote a whole piece on that. I said, bravo, that's exactly what a president needs to be saying. Nobody's even talked about this really since JFK back in 1961 when he gave the famous American University speech in which he said, maybe we could end this Cold War through negotiations. I wouldn't put it past Trump as having the capacity to do that. It would be a wonderful thing, but I don't know if we're going to get from here to there because, there's going to be so much broken furniture in between.
There are also a lot of broken brains out there. Think of how many progressives pretended over the years that that's what they really wanted, was at least a 50% military cut.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you'll get it, but not the way you counted on. And if they can't get it the way they want, then they would rather keep bombing the kids, They would rather keep burning people alive, apparently. It's psychotic, these people. That's what you said you wanted.
You have not overstated it. It's psychotic. When you listen to them, they're saying NATO is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Don't say a word negative about it. Ukraine is fighting. Their freedom fighters went, it's a total disaster. Absolutely unnecessary, not related in any way, shape, or form to the Homeland Security of America. And yet, here they are on CNN every night, and then saying, that Trump is going to give away the sword to Putin. And then they demonize, Putin's no wonderful man, of course, but they demonize him beyond any recognizable reality. And they're basing, foreign policy on demonization of personality when it should be based on what it takes to defend the homeland. You're right. The progressives have lost it entirely, and they're a menace. Especially you saw it. Okay, the real image was when Zelensky was here a week ago, and before he went in for that fateful meeting in the Oval Office, which could have changed the course of history. That's what I said. It changed the course of history because I know now we're getting out of Ukraine, and maybe the world's going to start to understand that all these forever wars were the wrong way to go. But anyway, there's these pictures that came out of Zelensky meeting with the Senate, bipartisan Senate leadership beforehand that was encouraging him to stand firm with Trump. Okay, so I called it the board of directors of the warfare state. And it's really terrible. These guys have been there 2, 3, 4 terms. And from Lindsey Graham on our side, to the whole passel of Democrat senators on the other side, telling Zelensky, keep the war going. And that's what we saw. And, it's another, illustration of the mess that we're really in today.
Well, no kidding. Well, a very, very helpful step forward for anybody who might want to escape from this terrible situation we're in is, of course, your new book with the provocative title, How to Cut $2 Trillion. I've got the link. You can get it all the usual places, but I got the link in the video description. And of course, David Stockman's ContraCorner.com. Did I ever ask you, did you ever come up with like a shortcut way to get to David Stockman's ContraCorner.com?
Yeah, there is. I don't have it off the top of my head.
We'll figure it out for next time.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I'll also link to that in the video description because if you read David Stockman, you'll be on top of everything. And when you see How to Cut $2 Trillion, when you look through that book, it is packed with more information, more useful information and data than books 10 times its size. And that's true of the articles you'll read from David Stockman. You'll be the most informed person your friends know. And they'll say, how do you know so much? And if you're feeling particularly generous, you'll say, why? I am briefed by David Stockman every day. But chances are, instead, you'll probably say, well, I try to stay on top.
Well, I'm not inventing anything. I'm only displaying the real facts about things that people need to know. And so that's the best you can do.
Yeah, absolutely true. So go get your copy of How to Cut $2 Trillion. David, thank you so much for your time today and for standing up for the great Thomas Massie, who must feel very isolated this week, but he should know that he has an army behind him.
Yeah, and he has an army behind him. And if it comes to that, where we do get a primary, anybody who cares about constitutional government, personal liberty, free markets, capitalist prosperity, all a peaceful foreign policy, all of those Ron Paul values need to do extraordinary things to make sure that they don't get away with purging the one guy in the entire Congress of the United States who stands for the principles that we talk about every day.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. David, thanks again.
Okay, great.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.